Welcome to Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. My name is Talib Jasir, founder and CEO of Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, the first two-day conference for and by Black independent podcast creatives and audio professionals. I'm excited to spotlight 28 outstanding indie podcast creatives who answer the call to be a part of the series. Today, my guest is Spencer Langevin and SJ from the Arrogant Pupil podcast. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So before we get into the podcast, because I'm interested in the name and what y'all been up to, tell us a little bit about yourself. Either of you can start.
I'll start just as the dad in the room. But Spencer Langevin is my name. I'm a 43-year-old father and father of three and husband, son, brother, and friend to many. So just honestly, the one thing I would love to say is that the one thing about me, I would say in the last 10, 15 years is like really thinking about legacy and understanding the tools that are available to us to stamp who you are, what you're about, and this medium of podcasting and just pulling from my own story and wanting to connect with my son as well as other fathers out there who are in their late 30s, early 40s, who have kids who are approaching adulthood and the conversations that come with that, and what can I offer to that conversation?
To piggyback off of that, I'm Spencer as well, Spencer Jr., SJ, 19 years old, visual artist. I'll take his lead, brother, son, friend to many. And I think he's brought me along on this journey, and I've grown to understand his why, and I'm starting to try to figure out my own why as to why we're doing things like this and finding different outlets to start and have conversations and give our output on different aspects of our own lives and trying to, share to whoever may be listening. I'm glad to be here and glad to be a part of all this.
All right. Well, thank you. And I really appreciate you both for showing up and being part of this series. I wish that I was aware of podcasting when I was trying to connect with my daughter when she was leaving, because I taught her how to skateboard, and that would have been much easier to do this instead of, skateboarding. So anyway, talk to us about the Arrogant Pupil. Why did you start it? Tell us about the name, and how's it been going for you?
Yeah, so it's funny. The name came pretty organically. Believe it or not, Childish Gambino used this thing called the Wu-Tang name generator, right? And I read that however many years ago. I honestly can't remember how long ago it was. And I always thought the name was dope. And then I went on and used it as well. And I put my full name, Spencer David Langevin Sr., and the Arrogant Pupil was spit out to me. And so I saw that and I started thinking, like, does this really fit who I am? The word arrogant could be off-putting to a lot of people. You look up the word and it's outspoken and bold and willing to take risks and thinking highly of self. And then the word pupil, obviously a student, somebody who's going to be humble and looking to learn from others. And it just reminded me of the duality of the human experience. I also have worked 17 years in the education field, so I understand a child who might want to be arrogant and outspoken. I also understand the pupil who wants to absorb and gather knowledge from others. And then I started to look at even people in my own life, specifically my father, who, again, I'm 43. He passed away when I was 27, and he was Superman to me. And so when I started looking and hearing more about his backstory, he was an outspoken man, but he was also one of the brightest men in any room, and also one of the most loyal men that you'll meet. And so I started piecing together that name to things that align with who I actually am and what some of my lineage is, and it stuck. And even the logo that you see is, you have two versions of it. One is a minimalist holding a pencil. So I'm ready for the fight, but I also have my pencil, which has an eraser, which means that I understand that I'm going to make mistakes along that journey. And even with the color version of the logo, there's different hues in it that acknowledge that, hey, we're all in this fight together. And so, again, the Wu-Tang name generator is where this started, but it started to really align with who I am without me having to force myself into this box of this name. So again, an organic beginning, but definitely authentic to who I am.
All right, that's dope. I appreciate that background. So SJ, when your dad came to you with this podcast idea, talk to us about that.
To tell the truth, I wasn't fully on board at first. I think I grew up a soft-spoken, I'm gonna keep my thoughts to myself kind of person. So hearing about the idea of starting a podcast and actually having to talk about things I was interested in and felt, I was a little put off by that idea, but we've had countless conversations, pretty passionate conversations as to why he wanted to do it and why he felt it was in our best interest to just try it at first. It was a trial run at first. It was over
During quarantine.
over quarantine. So it was like, all right, we have so much time on our hands. We might as well try. Let's see where it takes us. If we don't like it, cool. If we like it, we'll continue down that road. And I eventually gave in. And the early days were a little shaky for me, at least. It was just like trying to find my lane and trying to get myself out of this quote unquote quiet box. And eventually, as I'm starting to like mature into a young adult, I think I'm starting to slowly step out of what my comfort zone was a couple of years ago when we first started. So it's become a little easier. And I think even the name, The Arrogant Pupil, I think I'm starting to, I'm not sure if it's consciously or subconsciously, I think I'm starting to grow into a representation of the phrase, of the name. So I didn't see the vision at first, but I'm glad he kept me along for the ride and I stuck through with it. I'm definitely proud of the name, proud of the brand, and hearing from his own life experience and experiencing my own life in a way, I think we both are growing into what the arrogant pupil means to each of us.
Yeah, that's cool. So as you both decided, okay, this is what we're going to stand on, these are the topics that we're going to discuss. And as I said before we started recording, I've listened to a few episodes and you talk about things that are light, from entertainment and media and sports to actual issues, social justice issues, things that are unique to Black people experiences, Black men experiences. So how has it progressed? How has the conversations progressed for both of you? And on top of that, where do you say, oh, we have to talk about this? Like, we have to talk about this for our listeners. We need to make sure that they at least know our perspective on this. How did you all frame that up for yourselves?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, it was more, I wanted to stamp conversations that I wasn't able to have with my own father. He was a pretty stoic man. He was a man of few words. And then as I got older and when I made him a grandfather, I saw a totally different side of him that I wanted so much more of. And I wasn't able to actualize all of those conversations. So it really was born out of that. And so a lot of times when we ideate an episode, it's more about, hey, what's on your mind? And we trade those stories and it's like, all right, we can talk about this. What can we talk about organically? And that's a rough outline of conversation. And then there's always a moment in each episode where the conversation just blooms that had nothing to do with a note that he wrote or nothing to do with a note that I wrote. So I don't believe that we've gotten to a point where we're like, this is something we have to talk about outside of, at least for me, outside of, hey, here's a jewel or what I perceive to be a jewel for life. And I think in the space of social media and news consumption, that the quick news consumption, a lot of it is very provocative. A lot of it is very negative, to be quite honest. And it's not, to me, there was a void of real talk between men. Older man, younger man, son, father, big brother, big sister, those types of conversations are not as provocative. And so for us, it's more about what can we organically speak about? And his perspective is going to be different from mine sometimes and vice versa. So it's just more about the organic conversation. And from that, just because of who I am, there's going to be something that is relevant to society or something that needs to be spoken about from a racial perspective or just what I perceive to be right or wrong.
And SJ, when it comes to you, when I heard some of the things, the podcast, and you're like, yeah, I actually don't want to talk about that. But
yeah, and I appreciate, what's funny is, real quick, I'm sorry. What's funny about that is I want to give him room to feel that, just because my father's talking doesn't mean that the views of his are his, or I don't want to talk about that. Let's pivot. And we'll sharpen that up as time goes on. But again, those organic things, it also reminds me that he's a young man who's finding his voice. And I have to be a place where he can exercise that voice within reason. And so he's got an old soul. He probably won't tell you that, necessarily show that in these moments, but he definitely has his own voice and has his own perspective and isn't afraid to respectfully state that, hey, I want to pivot away from this.
Definitely. I enjoyed the dynamic because it's true to life, right? It's those experiences where SJ is finding his voice inside this. You're even discovering your voice inside of it. It's a brand new endeavor. It's a podcast. And so the realness of it is that you're both exploring something for the first time together and finding yourself. And so it may seem that because you're senior that you got it all, but this is actually something that you both are taking the journey together. And that's really cool.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Absolutely. So SJ, when it comes to the development, I see where the podcast started, and I think it was in early 2019. And then there's been some breaks because of the pandemic and life and going off to school and things like that. What's been the really driving force for saying, listen, let's come back to this? I know we had to stop for this. I know life happened here and all of that, but this is important enough for us to say, we started something, let's continue it as best as we can.
I think it's important. I think while the world does what the world does, it doesn't stop for the podcast. It doesn't stop for anybody. So I think learning and adapting to the ever-changing, not the ever-changing world necessarily, but just your life is constantly changing. You wake up one day, you do something different every day. There's things that are going to come up in your day-to-day and in your life that you have to just adapt. And when we make a commitment to the podcast, and I went away for school for 1.5 years just about, and our schedules have conflicted, and there have been sometimes, even podcasts aside, that while I was away at school I hadn't spoke to him every single day, and we would come back, I would call him just about every Sunday to recap the week and talk about things that some may be podcast topics, but some are just like regular life things. So I think it was important that while there were times that our schedules didn't always match up, that it was important that we hold each other accountable for the podcast schedule and making sure that we're constantly thinking about conversation topics and things that both of us found interesting, or things that I found interesting versus things that he found interesting, that we can both come to the podcast about. There are things that he has talked about that I've had no idea about, and there are things that I've talked about that he's had no idea about. So I think it creates an interesting dynamic, especially when there are times where we're not
clicking on the same page, able to link up on a particular date. It's still true to the name, at least the Pupil side of it. We're still learning, and we're okay with that. We're committed to the long game of this. And my wife has a long career in marketing, and she is very clear in just letting us know that everything is a process, and you're not going to catch red hot flame overnight. It may look like that on Instagram, or when you're looking at Drink Champs or the Joe Budden podcast, it just looks like everything is just clicking at all times. But we've even seen drama play out in those shows that are more established, where there's hiccups here and there. And we understand that. Jay-Z is my favorite rapper. He has a quote where he's basically saying that no time or space is going to dictate the way my process works. And so that is really one of the pillars of how we work, is that it's going to come to us when it comes to us. And when we're really ready to get rocking and rolling, we're going to lock in and do what needs to be done to produce as much content as possible.
No, absolutely. And I love the fact that you are committed to this and continuing it no matter what. Whenever you come back to it is whenever you come back to it. And that's really the great part of this, as well as just listening to the first one. SJ, you were 17, now you're 19, right? And then there was an episode where you shared a Facebook memory. And I won't bring that up here, but
well, we can talk about it.
I want people to listen to the podcast.
Right. No doubt. I appreciate it.
Yeah. But the point of that is that this is an opportunity for y'all to continue those memories and to look back. SJ is 2 more years older than you are, and see where your conversations were then versus that present. And so I think that's really a great opportunity for this podcast to journey your own growth, SJ becoming as well, but you being more established. So my question for you right now is, Spencer, I know this is part of your why. Since you started the podcast, how would you say, and this is a question for both of you, that it has bridged that gap that you were looking to fill when it came to, okay, my son is about to go to the next step. He's about to leave the house and go to school. And I want to make sure that we create memories and conversations that we can continue to have. How has that worked out for you? That's a question for the both of you.
I'll say this, and I talk a lot about my own life, my experience as the son of immigrant parents from Guyana, South America, growing up in the Newark area. I'm constantly sharing stories. Sometimes there's stories that I share that they've heard a million times. I'm gonna keep telling them because there might be something I remember that I didn't add in before. And this project and this business has made it very easy for me to continuously share with my children. And it helps to bridge the gap between not just SJ and I. I have a daughter who's 20, who's going to be 21 in a few months. I have a 14-year-old who's going to be 15 in a few months. And I have a wonderful wife who is doing amazing things in her career and just as a woman. So we all talk a great deal about who we are, our feelings, what we like, what we don't like. And this show specifically from father to son is really special for me because, again, like I said, the relationship I had with my father was amazing and I wanted more. And life happens and you don't get to have everything that you want in life. But sometimes I talk to him as if I'm having a conversation with my father. These are the types of things that I would want my father to tell me. So I tell him. And sometimes I leave him space to ask me questions that I know for a fact I wish I could have sat across the kitchen table to have with my father.
And I think from my perspective, the aspect of the bond between the two of us, I think has always been like strong since I'm his only son. And I think there's just a different dynamic when it comes to the relationship that him and I share. And I think even since I was a little kid, I feel like we talked about very mature topics since I was 10 years old and beyond. Yeah. The past year, since I've been able to construct a mature thought, I think we've been able to share conversations and have conversations that I wouldn't have expected to have at such a young age. And depending on how you look at it, I'm only 19, so I'm still growing into my own being. So I think it's important that, one, that to pat myself on the back a little bit, I think it's important for me to keep a level of, I guess, being in tune with my own being and being able to share what I've experienced and also gain knowledge based on his experiences and the lessons he's learned coming up. I guess the importance of growing into a young adult and the lessons, whether it's financial, emotional, dealing with just about everything in the world. I think he's done a very good job of me and helping, not even just podcast aside, I think just as a person, but also along the journey of the Arrogant Pupil podcast and the brand of the Arrogant Pupil. He's done a very good job of keeping me not on the straight and narrow necessarily, but keeping me seeing the same vision that he does. And I think growing up in a house where we were just open to having conversations, uncomfortable conversations about things we feel and being able to disagree with one another, I think that's a very important thing that, on the podcast, we've previously not agreed on everything. And I think we will continue to agree on a lot, but I think growing up and having conversations in the past has allowed me to have my own thoughts and not just agree with everything my father says, you know what I mean? So it's just being able to be open and having open conversations in the present and in the past can only be good for what's to happen in the future.
Absolutely. Is there any episode that stands out for either of you, like for you, Spencer, and for you, SJ? Is there any specific episode that you really are especially proud of?
I don't remember the episode, but I remember we were talking about, I think it was movies and the depiction of African Americans in movies. And SJ had made what I considered to be a very profound statement about there's a lot of ways to tell Black stories, and it doesn't have to be rooted in pain and violence. And so whether it be, Black science fiction or just other ways to tell stories. You remember that?
Yeah, I don't remember. I feel like we should remember, but I feel like so many things have happened. But yeah, we've had, even on and off air, we've continued that conversation about, I think it's important to me. I consider myself a visual artist. I've grown to love photography, but I've also am stepping into film. So I think it's important. I've watched countless amounts of movies, and I still have such a laundry list of important movies to go. But I think I know the Boys in the Hoods of the worlds and the Juices of the worlds and all of these stories that have similar plot lines of these young Black characters and their trauma and their pain. And I think it's interesting, and I think it's important to showcase certain stories. But for me, as an aspiring young Black artist I think it's important to be able to differentiate between the stories that were necessary for when they came out, and also the stories that are in my own head that don't include such traumatic events and such traumatic themes and topics of the Black experience. So yeah, we've gone back and forth about that. And I think that was a turning point in the podcast, because I feel like it was a moment where we realized it's okay to disagree with one another, and it's okay to talk about why we feel that way. But yeah,
it was one of those pieces of the conversation that weren't on the pre-production.
Right, yeah. We didn't plan to talk about that. Yeah. I remember that. It kind of just happened, and here we are.
No, it was really dope for me to hear that. And again, for him to stand on that and be able, if I'm not mistaken, I remember in the episode, it was more like, can you explain more? And so let me just give you the room to breathe on that, versus me coming in directly to say, no, Menace to Society is more necessary than whatever show you put up against it. But I appreciated that. And it was at that point that I knew what I knew about him, or what I believed about him as a father. He was stepping into that. And not only that, he stepped into it in a very lightly edited show that we then put out. And it was, all right, this is going to be stamped that this is one of those points where SJ said, no, this flag is mine and it's different than yours. And let's talk about it. So I appreciated that from him.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it happens to be that was one of the episodes that I was able to listen to. And it is important. I have 3 great relationships with my children, and that opportunity for them to be their own people, speak their own mind, and it's not inherited from me is perfect. That's what we want. Our children don't belong to us. We're just a part of their journey, and they to go and become. And so I really love that. And I think that what's so important about this podcast is that it shows what a relationship gets to be. As we get older, we start to redefine our relationships, especially parent to child.
Yeah.
And so this is coming of age story, especially for SJ, but also I can't negate that we're growing up as well with them. So as he steps into his own and shares perspectives, it expands you, and you continue to pour in and expand with him. So this is going to be a great journey, and I'm really looking forward to the more that you all are able to explore the topics and explore one another, because every day is going to be different. And it's great that y'all are able to capture that. I think that it's really important what we're doing in this industry, especially for Black folks, that we are leaving a living record of our experience and our perspectives. And so it's really special that you both decided to do this together.
Yeah.
So as you move into 2023 and you think about whatever it is, whether it's consistency or expansion, I see you have the merch, and that's really dope. What is the goal? What is the ultimate vision that you have right now, as far as that you can see that you want to share?
So our family, we don't specifically do New Year's resolutions. We've done vision boards in the past. We've talked about resolutions on New Year's Eve, but we went to dinner as a family, and my wife had posed the question of, what's one word that you want to embody for the year? And my word was consistency. Whether that's in exercise, whether it's in reading, whether it's in continuing a healthy routine, I just want to be consistent versus pick it up, put it down for 2-3 weeks, then go back to it. I want to develop better habits in reference to a number of things across my life, but one of the main goals is to be more consistent in recording. And also I want to consistently put out video as well. So believe it or not, this is our inaugural video. This is going to be our next episode once you're able to release the video to us, and it'll be our introduction into that. And that's really the goal for me. There's still life to be lived. He's living his own life, and there's still 1,000,001 things that I want to do. And it's only going to be better when we come together and share those things. And so the days and the journey that we're on is our content. It's just, what do we want to pull and how do we want to package it and deliver it to those who may gravitate towards it.
I think one of the most important themes I want to step into this year is just the idea of like staying solid, like within my own life, just like my personal day-to-day and also creatively. And I think like last 2 or 3 years, giving myself some grace, given the circumstances of pandemic and graduating high school and stepping into new walks of life. But I feel like I spent a long time, longer than I'd like to admit, just not really solid in what I stand for, and not stand for necessarily, but what I just want to do with my own life. So I think growing and maturing into to the person I'd like to be, I think staying solid, just staying grounded in my own life is what I find most important this year. And yeah, only time will tell what the results will look like. But I'm confident in the both of us and confident in what we have going for this year. I'm looking forward to seeing the end results.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. You're off to a great start, and I'd love to see how this continues to grow and flourish, especially as y'all really do find your footing and that consistency, because it's some great stuff out there. I really enjoy what I've heard.
Thank you.
The conversations that you're having, and I'm sure others will. In the last episode I heard, you all were celebrating 1,000 downloads. Talk about that.
Yeah, every milestone counts. And again, I stated earlier, we're not going to strike fire overnight. But if you only celebrate when you make 1 billion, it's going to take some time. And so you may not make it to that point without giving yourself that little pat on the back, owning the fact that you have made progress along the way. All of those little nuggets keep you energized on that journey. So just really, we started this from a conversation between us, my wife, and a friend of mine who used to run a studio. And then we started, and here we are. So I'm proud, even if there was not another download ever. I'm proud of my son. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud that we had the idea, started it, and other people heard it. But there's more to share. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Podcasting is special. Your listeners are choosing you. These are folks who decide that this is who I want to listen to. This is who I want to bring into my entertainment or news source experience. And it's important. It's a community of people who, for whatever reason, chose the Arrogant Pupil. And that's special in a lot of ways. It's not like just binging the television show or movie. Right. It's a choice that your listener is doing. And so there's so much value in that. And so I'm looking forward to, again, just seeing how much more value you all add to this space. And hopefully you're getting some feedback, from listeners and that sort of thing, because I'm sure it's resonating. This is important. Father, son, having conversations. I'm hoping that you are supporting people and having conversations.
Absolutely.
I'm hoping that it's a resource for, say, listen to this and listen to SJ's perspective on this. And this is where I was coming from when I was trying to say this to you. All of that, it becomes a tool. Thank you. Thank you for being willing to share your voices in this space, because it is definitely it's beneficial.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, man. We're looking forward to possibly joining you in Maryland in October.
That would be awesome.
Definitely. I think the space specifically for people of color needs to be well represented. And so when you have institutions like yourself who have jumped out the window, and I'm not just going to have a show, I'm going to create a space for others to network across and network with other Black creators. You can't lose at that. And that grind may take some time as well, but very thankful. When I came across the post to apply, it was a no-brainer for me. And I'm just really thankful that we were picked and we're able to wrap it up this morning.
Absolutely. I appreciate y'all. So last thing I wanted to have you all touch on is any words of advice, any thoughts that you want to share with folks who are considering, whether it's a parent, child, or a person who just wants to create a podcast. There are not a lot that decide that this is the duo that we're going to put out there, host a podcast. So what would be your advice around this? And also just sticking with the podcast, no matter what happens in life.
You want to start?
I was just thinking that, and I was trying to find
a way to start. I
was trying to find a way.
I'm trying to throw you alley-oop.
No, I think advice from me, I think it's important to, I guess, to find your why. I think we were talking earlier about our own why. And I think if you want to start podcasting specifically, whether it's podcasting or stepping into any creative venture or just any venture in life for that matter, I think it's important to find your why and just be intentional with the work that you put out. I think with the importance of social media now, I think a lot of people are just putting things out just to put it out and hoping people like it. And there's not, I feel like, to me, in what I am looking for in different creative fields, I feel like there's not a lot of creators that are doing it for a specific reason. I think they're just doing it just to do it. Right, and I think for us, as we are slowly starting to solidify our why, we can take the next steps further into new territory when it comes to the podcast. So I think, so whether it's other father-son duos out there or mother-daughters or any variation of those, I think it's important to find your why and find what conversations that you are willing to have on air. There's a lot of conversations him and I have off air that they're more personal conversations that just aren't necessarily for the podcast. So I think it's important to sit down and actually really hone into why you want to put content out and why you find it important.
Yeah. It's very similar to what SJ just said, but I think it's, we're not venture capitalists. Every word I utter is not, I'm not looking for it to be traded and overvalued or undervalued. My goal is to have, again, organic conversation. And I think that a lot of people turn the camera on for AdSense and to go viral. If we go viral with any snippet, great, because I know that the reason that we're going viral is because people wanted to hear what was said. I recognize, honestly, that it's funny. I just had this conversation with my wife last night that things that might end up in your explore page on Instagram really is a reflection of you. So if there is a level of negativity or men bashing, woman bashing, whatever, you must have seen something that you consumed, which is why Instagram or these other platforms are still feeding it to you. And so it's really important to us to not get into the weeds of that level of negativity. One, because it's not who we are. Two, I'm not just going to say or do anything specifically to catch a viral moment. And I would love viral moments to be father and sons having conversations about emotional maturity and the respect of self, the respect of women, and understanding that just because you think it doesn't mean it needs to be said in the moment. I don't want to do verbal gymnastics just to get views. I want to have real conversations. I want to connect with people. There's 1,000,001 40+ old fathers out there who have teenage boys, teenage girls. What kind of conversations are you having with them? And those are the people that I want to speak to. And that is never going to bashing anybody, including the Knicks. I just want to take this moment. We are reformed Knick haters. And I think we captured that on the podcast, but we've been knighted by a longtime Knick fan, and we vowed to go easy on the Knicks.
Go Knicks.
We're learning.
That's
just
funny.
Be clear about what it is you want to say, and just know that just because it may be controversial doesn't mean that it needs to get any more light than it already did.
Absolutely. I appreciate the perspective. I absolutely appreciate this conversation today.
Yeah.
Please tell the people where they can find Arrogant Pupil and where they can find you on social media or wherever.
Yes, you can find us at the Arrogant Pupil on Instagram. You can find us there on YouTube. We will actually be in the next couple of weeks launching a show, which is a Amazon product where we're able to pick music and really create a playlist on this platform and also engage with people if they want to have short conversations with us. We'll be back to recording in the next couple of weeks as well. And if you want any merch, you can find it at thearrogantpupil.com.
Okay, great. I definitely want to let you promote that AMP program if you want to.
Early stages,
Okay.
but it's a platform that we've been looking at for the past couple months, and I've been able to catch a couple of shows from other folks. And we have similar tastes in music, but there's also some differences there as well. There'll be things like SJ versus Spencer Senior playlist and ways that we could play off of our differences and similarities through that platform without catching any copyright issues. So that was the main goal of us finding that sort of platform.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, and being as though we are the blueprint of hip hop and all things that are great in music, I'm interested in seeing this comparison that y'all have. It should be really dope. Any last words that you want to give to folks before I close this up?
I just want to stamp that I appreciate my son taking this journey with me. I know that there's 1,000,001 things that he could be doing that have nothing to do with me, but we have worked at our relationship, and I'm really thankful that we are as close as we are and that we respect each other's differences. And I'm ridiculously proud of this young man and looking forward to the journey.
Thank you. So yeah, quickly, I
put him on the spot.
No, it's okay. I expressed similar sentiments earlier, but I'm thankful that he kept me on the journey and allowed me to see the same vision that he did when it came to what just started as an idea. And thankfully, we have the same name. So the Arrogant Pupil, even though the senior might have changed versus the junior on the Wu-Tang name generator, I think the arrogant people lives in the both of us.
No doubt.
So I think that came organically. We didn't force ourselves to try to feed into what arrogance versus what being a pupil meant. I think we just organically just live in what the arrogant people means to each of us. And just quickly for people, whoever's listening, watching, thank you for taking the time to watch this conversation. And I guess one tidbit of advice I can leave anybody who's willing to listen is, stay solid in what you got going on in your life. Do what you want, because if it don't matter to anybody but you, then do it, go for it. And yeah, I think just living your truth, living your why, living your what you want to do in your life, regardless of what anybody else has to say about it, I think it is something I've learned to be most important. Yeah.
That's what's up. Respect, man. I appreciate it. Spencer, I know you must be super proud.
Absolutely.
And I'm over here proud and I don't got nothing.
Thank you.
But no, I'm proud of the both of you, what you're willing to share, because it's good stuff. And I'm looking forward to, like I said, the evolution of the both of you inside of this project, but also people getting to learn more about you as the journey continues. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you very much, man. And thank you for sharing the platform with us. And like I said, looking forward to seeing you in Baltimore. Real quick, I just want to salute all the Black fathers out there of young men or women. Our jobs are important. And like you said, our kids, we don't own them. We are shepherds in their journey. And all those guys out there that are taking that seriously and doing the work, it doesn't go unnoticed. And we want to salute and heighten those voices.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm going to close this out and I just ask you both to stay right there.
Sure.
So I want to give a big thanks to our Afros in Audio and Black podcast community for supporting our commitment for community and collaboration. If you'd like to join the Black Podcasters Association, the link will be in the description below. And if you want to join us at the 5th annual Afros in Audio Podcast Festival, visit bit.ly/AFAU FAQ, which will also be in the description. Follow us on all social media channels at Afros in Audio. And thanks again, Spencer and SJ, for being a part of Afros in Audio's first ever Black History Month interview series. I appreciate it.
Thank you.